So hello again. I guess I now don't need to introduce myself because I just did. But I will briefly introduce my panel members, and I will start with the star of the session, Sarah Beiser. Sarah is from Fox Rothschild in New York, where she heads both the international arbitration team and the construction team.
And the Israeli practice group.
And the Israeli practice group.
Most important.
And I hope that the combination will give you some insights on our next session. To her right is David Goldberg. David is a founding partner at Pinne Goldberg, a law firm in London, Paris, and DC, correct? Yes. And he's a board member at the LCIA, so we get to work a lot on occasion. To my left is Daniel Schimmel. Daniel is a partner at Foley Hoag in New York. He chairs the dispute resolution or international arbitration or both.
In the New York office.
In the New York office of Foley Hoag. And he has a lot of experience sitting as arbitrator in international disputes in Israel. And to the far left is Zvi Bar Nathan. I don't think anyone needs an introduction to Zvi. He heads the international arbitration practice in Goldfarb, where he's also the chairman of the firm, which is in my mind too difficult to handle, but I guess it's only in my mind. So the topic of this panel is how do we transform Israel into an international arbitration hub? And I think there are a few questions that needs to be addressed in order to do that. And during this session, we're going to address them. We don't have a lot of time, so we'll try to make it on time. And we'll start with you, Daniel. The question is, what do you think are the strengths of Israel as a seat for international arbitration?
בוקר טוב לכולם. קודם כל רציתי להגיד לכם שהיה חשוב מאוד להיות כאן היום איתכם בפתיחת המרכז הישראלי לבוררות בינלאומית ולעזור לפעילות המרכז, ואני שמח מאוד להיות איתכם. To answer, Shai, Thank you. To answer your question, I think there are four major assets that Israel has. Asset number one is the community of very strong lawyers and law firms in Israel. As Shai said, I sat as chair of two international arbitrations in Israel, ICC arbitrations, and I was impressed by the quality of the lawyering. I was also impressed by how intense the lawyers are here, more so than in other places. But the quality of the lawyering is amazing, and I think that this human capital is the first thing. The second thing is the fact that you have a neutral and impartial judiciary. If you look at the 2015 Queen Mary University survey, they asked in-house lawyers, what's the most important thing for you in selecting a seat? They said a neutral and impartial legal system. You have that. From what I saw...
We still have.
I'm getting there. From what I saw in the arbitrations that I worked on, when a party here seeks the assistance of the Israeli courts during the arbitration proceedings, what I saw is that the assistance is truly extraordinary. And extraordinary in the sense that the court focuses on the facts and the issues, and is also very differential to the arbitrators. And when you have this combination of a judiciary that's focused on the facts and the issues, and differential, and a dialogue between the court and the arbitrators, the result is that the award gets better. It is a strength that you have. I hope that you get to keep it. And I say this because when an in-house lawyer looks at a seat of arbitration, he or she will spend 3 minutes on the topic. It's not a long conversation. And if there's any doubt about the quality, the neutrality, impartiality of the judiciary, the conversation ends. So you have it, and I hope you get to keep it. The third asset is the how strong is the national domestic arbitration law. And here you now have an international commercial arbitration law that is modeled on the UNCITRAL model law, and which improves the situation in a number of ways. But one key way is that the conversation with the in-house lawyer becomes easy. You can just say, Israel has a law that's modeled on the UNCITRAL model law, and to be able to say that sentence is in itself an asset. And the fourth asset is the infrastructure and the resources. When I sat on in an arbitration hearing here, it was during a SAGR, it was during COVID, and despite this, all of the resources that we needed, all of the infrastructure, including IT, was available, and certainly in times of peace, this is an incredibly strong asset. So the quality of the lawyers, the independence and the quality of the judiciary, the resources and the arbitration law, I think are very, very strong assets that you have.
Thank you very much, David. I think just one comment is that, well, we have everything because we have Walt, so it's... But I think, and the fact that Tel Aviv Arbitration Week got postponed from this week kind of needs to be addressed, and when I drafted this question, it started with the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is the current geopolitical situation and the international criticism against Israel. And the next question goes to Sarah. And do you think there's a chance for Israel to become an international hub for arbitration in the current geopolitical situation?
That's actually a complex question, I think, with a complex answer. Do I think that Americans or the rest of the world are going to flock to Israel right now? The answer is no. And in fact, I think, I live here part-time, and every time I come here, which is every 3 or 4 weeks, I think everyone in my office sits Shiva, because or in advance, or they plan on sitting Shiva for me, and they wait for my emails to tell them that at least I'm still alive. But in planning an institution, if you look at the history of the different institutions throughout the world, no one that started became a hit right away. And I'm going to use the Singapore International Arbitration Center as an example. They formed in 1991. And so that's 34 years ago. And the statistics are, forming in 1991, the Institute, by the year 2000, that was 9 years later, had only 58 cases. 58 cases in 9 years in Singapore. Who doesn't want to be in Singapore? Well, apparently, people do want to be in Singapore because in 2023, last year, they had 663 cases. And we know from a study of the different institutions throughout the world that the ICC is actually, their new cases have reduced. And what does that tell us? It tells us that there's not less international arbitration in the world, there's actually more international arbitration, but is going to different regions in the world by countries who said, we're going to do this, and we can. To give you some numbers, the ICC in 2016 had, before COVID obviously, had 966 new cases in that year. In 2023, there were, from 966, 2023, it went down. The ICC new cases were 890. However, And this is just, these numbers I'm going to give you in terms of aggregate are just based on the major arbitral institutions. The new cases in 2016 were 3,793. 3,793. And the new cases in 2023 were about 500 more. So at a time when it went from 3,793 to 4,222, the ICC dropped by about 80 or 90. So that's interesting and not a data point that everybody knows. So where did those cases go? They went to regional institutions. So that tells us that it's possible. It will not happen overnight. People are not streaming to Israel right now, in part because El Al is the only company flying, so it's a little bit difficult. But for those of us who want to get here, I can tell you that we have no problem getting here. You go on El Al, you go to Europe first, but you get here. But people over the course of history, even Mark Twain, I have no idea what came to Mark Twain to want to get to Israel, but even he got to Israel. We read about that, I think, the 2 sentences he wrote.
He didn't like Israel.
He didn't. Okay. So yes, I think it's possible. In terms of Jewish history, there's never been a good time for us. You know, in 1948, I'm sure, of course, that at least 50% of the Jews here told Ben Gurion, May 14th, 1948, is a terrible day. Don't do it. The English are leaving. Why do we have to do it on that day? It's a terrible day. In 1995, when the U.S. Congress said that Jerusalem, I need the U.S. Congress to tell us that Jerusalem's our capital, thank you very much. But they finally, after 2,000 years, decided that, yes, Jerusalem is our capital. And that was apparently not a good time. And I remember, a few years ago when Trump decided that, yes, Jerusalem is our capital, people in my office came up to me and said, don't you think it's a little too early? Do you really think that this is the time? And so, I know you told me last night I have to stop talking. And my response to him is apparently he'd been speaking to my husband. So I will try to stop talking, but I will leave with, this is a perfect time to do it. It's a perfect time. The naysayers may be occupied in a few other details that they're involved in Gaza or in Lebanon or somewhere, or maybe they're in the United States protesting against us. Who cares? This is a perfect time to do it. And we will be successful if 25 years from now, someone is sitting here and giving the same stats that I gave about the Singapore International Arbitration Center. So yes, Menashe, thank you, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Was that short enough?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah.
I've got 20 minutes more, but I will cede to someone else.
It's okay. So last night we had an interesting conversation around the table. We had dinner and Menashe discussed the facilities that we have here, the hearing facilities. On the same table, we had at the end of the table a different discussion about a case that I think it's now over, but maybe still ongoing in London, where they have 3 rooms, 3 hearing rooms with 120 lawyers in each of the 3 hearing rooms. And that is something that Israel doesn't have the capacity for at the moment, unless we take up 3 hotels or something like that. And the question for you, David, and it goes beyond the facilities and the centers and the physical presence, how much also is the language, the Hebrew language, a barrier for international arbitration to come over to Israel?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Shai. Thank you, organizers. And apologies for my voice. I've tortured many of my friends here in Israel by my story about me sitting as an ICC tribunal chair in 2003 with the seat of arbitration, Tel Aviv, Israel, on a telecom dispute. And my co-arbitrators were one Israeli ex-minister of telecoms and the other Ukrainian minister of justice. And as a chair of a tribunal seated in Israel, I needed to well, first understand what is the law, what is the procedural law that governs our function and gives us powers. First, I couldn't find anything. I found this blue book, many of you know, by Professor Otto Lengi, I think, which was not easy to find in London anyway at that time. And then I asked my Israeli co-arbitrator whether Israel was a neutral country. And the answer was I haven't got a clue. I'm a telecoms guy. So it was a bit of a challenge. English language is important. And I think it's not a problem in Israel. I don't share optimism of the previous two speakers about the Israel's position as it is now, but I think the language is not the biggest struggle because the legal profession is highly developed, well, all people speak English, all people draft in English, and many Israeli lawyers have Western education as well as Israeli. And obviously universities here are top class. So I don't think that is the challenge. It is still an uphill struggle. And I can say that because I've been involved, I give up on that hobby, but I used to help Kazakhstani, Uzbekistani, Kyrgyzstani arbitration centers, Malaysia, and even Dubai at some stage. But I think one of the challenges is for the universal sort of approach to the New York Convention, for the judiciary to become part of the international judiciary community. I'm not saying you are not, please don't get me wrong, but the New York Convention application and uniformity of application of the New York Convention is one of the challenges for any country. There are problems with the United States, there are problems with the United Kingdom, in Europe. So the ICA training of the judiciary is something that should be considered, in my view. Then also there are different institutions that may help Israeli judiciary to become part of the international judiciary in international arbitration. I think this is one of the points. And I've just checked this morning, Israel or Israeli judiciary is not part of the standing international forum of commercial courts. Again, I can help for Israel to join it, but it is a body that consists of now 57 members, i.e. judiciary commercial courts from 57 countries that meet regularly and speak or discuss international arbitration, amongst many other things. So it's a long answer. English language, not a problem, but there are other challenges, and obviously geopolitical situation, which can be, obvious view is that it is a massive disadvantage, but it can be turned into an advantage, in my view.
Thank you, David. I think Israelis are experts in turning lemons into lemonades, so I think we can do that. I will just comment briefly that we've been trying over the past few years to bring the ICA New York Convention Roadshow to Israel. Up until now, unfortunately, unsuccessfully. But this is a goal that we aim to achieve and to promote and to bring in the judiciary to support the cause as well. I think that is one of the main things that is missing, unlike London, where you see judges actually promoting London as a seat. That usually doesn't happen in Israel. It's very rare for an acting judge to stand up and say, let's bring it to Israel. But let's hope we'll get there someday.
Can I just add? Obviously, the standing committee, again, if any of the judges in Israel or practitioners are interested, I can do the introductions. It's Mr. Justice Robin Knowles, who is now famous for some of his judgments, including the famous Zimbabwe fraud in international arbitration judgment, etc., etc. He is very much involved. I can introduce to him the judges from here, and they can take it from there. The LCIA in the 90s, speaking of the history, was 3 people on the 6th floor on the Fleet Street. Adrian Winstanley, Irene Bates, and an accountant. But look where it is now. So one can always start with sort of not that much of an infrastructure basis, but then aim high.
Thank you. We actually, in Israel, we have some sort of experience in trying to promote international arbitration and trying to build and to promote Israel as a hub for international arbitration. That is the Jerusalem Arbitration Center, or JAC. And Zvi, you were involved in the I would say, the inauguration of the institution, which is now not in existence anymore. And my question to you, what are the lessons that we can learn from that experience and implement now to make the current attempt a success?
Okay. Let me tell you a little bit about the JAC. The JAC was an initiative. It was established in 2013 in an initiative of the ICC, chaired then by Mr. John Beachy, and the Israeli ICC branch and this Palestinian ICC branch. It was basically an institution, an international arbitration institution situated in East Jerusalem, with like a mini ICC system, with a court of 9 participants, 2 Israelis, 2 on behalf of Palestine, and 5 prominent international arbitrators, including Yves Daren as the chairman, Professor Julian Liu, Gary Bourne, and the rules were based on the ICC rules, and it aimed to be a hub for international arbitrations between Palestinians and Israelis. Then the volume of commerce between Israelis and Palestinians was between $4 and $5 billion a year, and none of the parties could reach a satisfactory and enforceable judgments against the other party due to the situation. And the idea was both to make an efficient international arbitration hub, primarily for disputes between Palestinians and Israeli on commercial transactions, and also to promote peace, to promote peace. And this institution was launched in 2013 in East Jerusalem, with Tony Blair from the quartet, and a lot of efforts were made. And the problem was that even not one case was brought to this institution due to intimidation in the Palestinian side, intimidation on business people not to participate due to political aspects, not to participate in a joint venture between Israelis and Palestinians, all times that the Palestinian problem is not solved satisfactorily. So basically, it failed. It failed, although it was a beautiful idea, but I don't think that it's a lesson at all to the question whether Israel can be a hub for international arbitrations in general. We had an experience in international arbitrations in Israel. We sat together with Rozovsky, and in other cases, and I do agree that Israel can be a hub for international arbitrations. The JAC was an idea that failed only due to politics, not to anything that is connected to international arbitration, to facilities, to infrastructure. Both the courts in Jerusalem and Ramallah were forthcoming to enforce the arbitration awards if and when they will be rendered. Nothing of that happened, to our deep regret.
Thank you very much, Zvi. So we don't have a lot of time left, but I will now put an open question to all of you. Let me know if you want to address it. And the question is, what should we do better? So we discussed the judiciary, we discussed some issues with the independence of the judiciary. But if you have any comments or thoughts on that before we open the floor for a few questions.
Let's assume that everything you, Daniel, spoke about is in place. Okay, we have a strong judiciary. You didn't mention it. We have a lot of sun. We have good weather. And let's forget about, we're past the present situation. At the end of the day, it's commercial lawyers who have to write the arbitration provisions, right? So every individual, when you write your contract, you actually have to be disposed towards putting Israel as your seat. And I think that there needs to be greater outreach on a personal level between Israeli lawyers and, at the very least, American lawyers, because the American legal spend is a little bit more than 25% of the legal spend in the world. So that would go a very long way. And there's a lot of people in my office, and we have 1,000 lawyers who have never actually spoken to an Israeli except for the new Israeli. And that's it. And so why in the world, why would they ever know that there's an international or an Israeli international arbitration center? They wouldn't know it. And then if they did know it, they don't know any Israeli. So why would they do it? So I think it's a simple thing, or maybe not, but there needs to be outreach and a lot of publicity, but a personal connection. Because without that connection, I just can't see why an American lawyer is going to write that into an arbitration provision.
Okay, valid point.
Well, let me maybe follow up on this with a pitch or a suggestion. And it has to do with the number of motions or applications that are made in an international arbitration seated in Tel Aviv. And to start with statistics, for instance, arbitration seated in New York, you typically have 3 to 5 procedural orders before the arbitration hearing, the merits hearing, 3 to 5, right? I know of one case in New York where there were 26 procedural orders, and by New York standard, this is Mount Everest, right? Israel is Mount Everest kaful shtayim, or Mount Everest kaful shalosh. And I understand that it has to do with the practice in Israeli courts that is this way, and it also has to do with tradition. I'm French, American, and Israeli. I grew up in Paris. There's a word in French called chamailler. It means to argue all the time, and it has a Jewish origin. Because in the 16th century, in the area of Avignon in the south of France, the non-Jews were observing the Jews, arguing all the time about Rabbi Shammai and Rabbi Hillel, and they were so stricken, mesmerized, that they created this French word, chamailler, right, to argue all the time. And it's a feat. It's not easy to introduce a word into the French language. So the Jews must have made a very, very strong impression, which is great if you want to create a new word. But Uriel Lin said before, "Lo limshoch et hazman." It's less helpful if what you want to project is the image of a very strong arbitration seat. And I can tell you from my experience, I was honored to serve as a chair in Israeli arbitrations. I would have done it. I would have done the job whether there were 20 applications or 50 or 100. But if you look at the in-house lawyer that Sarah was talking about, you want the in-house lawyer to think of Tel Aviv in the 21st century. You don't want the in-house lawyer to think about Rabbi Shammai and Avignon in the 16th century. So my pitch is to, not aim for Everest in terms of the number of motions and applications. Aim for Carmel, aim for Hermon, and aim for Masada.
But Daniel, can I argue with you? We in New York argue all the time. We have 1 million motions. I can have an arbitration that has 100 orders, and we don't particularly think about it. So in New York, we're always arguing. There's 1 million motions. It is one of the reasons that arbitration is, we have fewer in arbitration than in litigation. But I don't see that as a major issue because I may be the one that wants to file the motions. You can respond.
Do you want to respond to that?
My husband
I think that it's important to. I think it's important to pick your battles, basically.
Okay, that's true, but that would not be a reason why I wouldn't write a provision to seat an arbitration in Israel. That would not be a negative to me. The fact that I could argue and that the court or that the arbitration panel wouldn't be fed up and they would listen to me and let me continue to argue, that would actually be, to me, a plus. Because I want to file as many as I can. I want to have that opportunity. So I'm glad you raised that, and I will tell American lawyers that this is dafka, this is exactly why you should go to Israel. Because the panel will not shut you up. They will not, that you won't have to apply to file the motion, and if you do, they're going to grant it. Or they're going to grant you the right to file the motion. That's key for me. It's a good point, and I like it.
So I think we can continue this
Yes.
argument after. Unfortunately,
We're both right.
We're all right. And unfortunately, we're out of time. So I would like to everyone to give applause to the panelists here. And thank you very much.